23 phones out of 104 failed the same step on a Tuesday morning, and nobody had touched any of them. Same model, same Android build, same automations. 23 broke, and 81 carried on, as if nothing had happened. It took me most of a day to work out what the 23 had in common. An app on them had updated itself overnight. I rent out real Android phones, physical handsets on a shelf in Singapore, a carrier SIM in each one, driven over the network from wherever the customer happens to be. A bit over 100 of them, about $200 a unit. So a change that arrives on every device at once, at 3 in the morning, sent by people who have never heard of my rack, is a specific thing I have to plan around. This is not the operating system moving. I have talked about the Android version and the security patch date before, and about keeping a fleet consistent, and this is neither of those. The platform version moves on the vendor schedule, twice a year if the model is well supported, and what it mostly costs you is whether apps that read that number still accept the device. Fleet consistency is a question about naming, scheduling, and whether device 6 behaves the same way as device 40. This is a third thing. One app on a device deciding at 3 in the morning that it would like to be a different version of itself. It happens 10 times as often as either of the other two. It arrives with no notice, and there is nothing anywhere you can read in advance to know it is coming. What an update actually is. An automatic update is a code change you did not authorize, written by people who have never seen your setup, tested against nobody's workflow, and shipped to every device you own on the same night. Put it in those words and it sounds insane. Write it as a checkbox labeled Keep Apps Up to Date, and almost everybody leaves it on. I left it on for the first year. I understand exactly why people do. The 4 things that break, the damage lands in 4 places, and they are not equally bad. The first is any automation keyed to the interface. Anything driven by tapping a coordinate or matching a text label breaks the moment somebody moves a button 8 pixels down or renames confirm to continue. And it does not throw an error. It taps empty space and reports success. That is the worst failure mode in this business. A script that fails loudly costs you an hour. A script that carries on cheerfully doing nothing costs you until somebody notices the output stopped being real. Second is a login flow that gains a step. An app that used to want a password now wants a password and a device check, or shows a consent screen once, or asks you to confirm an email address. Every unattended session on the fleet stops at that screen and waits there, politely, indefinitely. Third is a permission that resets to a stricter default. Background location drops from always to while in use. Notification access gets revoked because the new build declares it differently. Nothing tells you. The feature just stops working on a device that looks completely healthy in every monitor you have. Fourth is the dullest and the only one you can see coming. 50 devices pulling a 200 megabyte package on the same evening. On the network side, that is a spike on a graph. On the device side, it is storage I had already budgeted for, arriving in one lump. On the units that were closest to full, I have browned out a powered hub that way. 30 devices on one hub, all deciding to be busy at once, will do it. That fourth one is at least honest. It shows up immediately, and it tells you what caused it. The part that makes diagnosis miserable. Here is what turned one bad afternoon into 3 days. Updates do not land everywhere at once. They roll out in percentages. 5% today, 20 tomorrow. Halted entirely if the crash numbers come back wrong. Resumed on Friday, when somebody at the other end is happy again. Which means that for several days, half my rack is on one version and half is on another. And the two halves are scattered at random across shelves, customers and carriers. So the bug looks unreproducible. On the devices that already took the update, it reproduces every single time, which from the outside is indistinguishable from intermittent, and intermittent sends you to entirely the wrong places. I checked the carrier. I checked heat, because heat has genuinely caused this shape of problem for me before. I checked whether a hub was dropping devices under load. I read a customer script looking for a race condition that was never there. Every one of those is a sensible guess if you believe your fleet is uniform. Mine was not uniform. It had quietly split into two fleets overnight, and neither half told me. The tell, once you know to look for it, is embarrassing in how simple it is. Sort the failures by app versions instead of by symptom. If every failure is on one version and every success is on the other, you are finished in 4 minutes. I could not do that because I was not recording app versions anywhere. The log I did not have. That is the real lesson, and it is much duller than the story. I knew the Android build on every handset. I knew the patch date, the model, the SIM, the slot, and the hub. I had none of it for the applications, which is the one layer that changes weekly. It works on that one is only useful information if you can say why that one is different. So now every device reports its installed packages and their version codes on a schedule. Into the same place all the other device facts go. It is one command over ADB and a cron entry, and I put off writing it for about a year. The morning I switched it on, I found 3 different versions of the same app across the rack, and 2 handsets running something 11 months old that nobody had touched since the day they were provisioned. Turn it off and schedule it instead. The discipline is borrowed wholesale from how anyone sane ships software. Automatic updates go off on every device, including the ones nobody is automating, because those are exactly the ones where a broken login sits undiscovered for a fortnight. An update becomes a deploy. It gets a date, it gets somebody's name against it, and it happens at a time when a person is awake and looking at it. Keep a copy of the package you were already on. An update you cannot walk back out of is a one-way door with a friendly name, and the moment you want the old build is always the moment it has stopped being available anywhere. And check the setting again after every wipe. A reprovisioned handset comes back with the default switched on, so the discipline leaks one device at a time, quietly through the most routine thing you do. This is where people push back, so let me be direct. Yes, that is more work. It is roughly 20 minutes a week for me. I have spent 3 days chasing one staggered rollout, so 20 minutes a week reads as cheap. Keep 2 devices ahead of the fleet. The second half is canaries, and it is the piece most operators skip. 2 devices stay deliberately ahead of everything else. They take every update the moment it is offered, and they run a stripped-down version of the same work the fleet is doing. They are not rented to anyone. That costs me 2 units of revenue, and it is the best money in the building. When something moves, I hear about it from a canary on a Wednesday afternoon rather than from a customer on a Sunday night. Pick your canaries badly, and they are decorative. A canary with no accounts on it and no automation pointed at it will confirm that an update installed. It will not tell you that the login flow grew a step, which is the only thing you needed to know. Mine run the 2 flows that would hurt most if they broke, on a loop, with the results actually checked by something. The counterweight. Honestly, turning updates off is not free either, and the people who sell you on freezing everything tend to skip this part. Stay too far behind, and the platform comes for you anyway. Old client versions get cut off at the server. The app opens, shows a screen saying you must update to continue, and refuses to do anything else. At that point, you are taking the update on somebody else's schedule, at the worst possible moment, across the whole fleet at once, which is precisely the thing you turned it off to avoid. A version nobody else is on is also its own signal. A handset running a build from 11 months ago, logged into a consumer app that most people update without thinking, is a strange-looking device. So what I run is a window and not a freeze. 4 to 6 weeks behind the current release, moved forward on purpose every couple of weeks. Far enough back that the crash reports and the angry forum threads have already happened without me. Close enough that no server is going to lock me out of anything. I will argue with anybody who runs same-day updates on a production fleet. I will argue just as hard with anybody sitting 8 months behind who calls it stability. What I got wrong? The 8-month figure came from somewhere. It was me. After the 23 device morning, I overcorrected. Automatic updates off across the rack, done in an afternoon. And then I never built the schedule, because the fire was out, and there were other fires. The fleet sat still for most of a year. It felt like discipline. It was neglect with a policy written on top of it. Then one app reached its cutoff, and every device holding it stopped working inside the same day. 104 forced upgrades in one evening, taken blind, with no canary ahead of any of them, at exactly the moment I had the least room to absorb it. I had rebuilt the original problem at a larger scale and given it a name that sounded responsible. Switching auto update off is the easy half. The calendar entry is the half that does the work, and it is the half that quietly never gets made, where the line sits on rented hardware. One more thing, because it is specific to renting a device rather than owning it. On my red, the boundary is that I own the operating system and the customer owns their applications. I decide the Android version, the patch level, and the day your handset retires. They decide what gets installed and when it moves, so I cannot make this call for anyone. What I can do is hand over devices with automatic updates already off, so that turning them on is a decision somebody made rather than a default nobody looked at. A few customers switch it straight back on. That is genuinely fine. It is their fleet, and some workloads do not care. I would just rather they chose it than inherited it. If you want real Android phones in Singapore, where the version of everything is a decision somebody made on purpose, everything is at cloud.one. Subscribe for more on